Morning light cut through the blinds of Emma Rodriguez's studio apartment in thin golden strips. Design mock-ups covered her desk beside cold coffee mugs. She stared at her reflection, dark circles shadowing her olive skin. 3 weeks of bone-deep exhaustion that no amount of sleep could cure. The clinic waiting room smelled like antiseptic and fear. Emma filled out forms between a crying baby and an old man's newspaper rustling. Just routine blood work. Nothing complicated. Across the city, Julian Blackwood adjusted his tie in a penthouse mirror. 36 years old, billionaire, alone. He drove to the same medical center through a private entrance, taking an executive elevator to the 5th floor for a procedure he treated like a business transaction, preserving options, planning ahead. Emma lay on the examination table on the 1st floor. The lab technician who entered looked half dead with exhaustion. Name tag reads Zoe Chen. 20 hours into a double shift. I thought this was just blood work, Emma said, uncertainty creeping into her voice. Standard protocol, Zoe mumbled, barely listening, her hands moving on autopilot. Something felt wrong. Emma's body tensed. But the white coat, the official setting, the confident movements silenced her objections. She closed her eyes and trusted what she should have questioned. 3 hours later, Zoe's face went white as she stared at a computer screen. Wrong room, wrong patient, wrong everything. The genetic material meant for storage had been used on the wrong woman, who never consented. 21 days passed before Emma's phone rang. Ms. Rodriguez, this is Dr. Hammond. You need to come in immediately. The office was private this time. A lawyer sat in the corner. Dr. Hammond's face looked like stone. There was an error during your visit. A serious error. You were given a procedure you didn't consent to. He paused, the next words clearly painful. You're pregnant. The room tilted. The biological father is Julian Blackwood. Emma heard her own breathing too loud in the silent room. The tech billionaire. The man from magazine covers. The stranger. You made me pregnant? She whispered, rage and disbelief tangling in her throat with a stranger's baby. Without my permission. She walked out before they could respond. Made it to the street before the tears came. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. This is Julian Blackwood. I just learned what happened. We need to talk. Everything she'd planned, everything she'd built, was now tied to a man she'd never met and a child she never chose. She typed back with shaking hands. Where and when? The response was immediate. My office, tomorrow, 2 p.m. I'll send a car. Of course he would. The black car arrived at exactly 1:30. Emma wore her best navy dress like armor. The city blurred past tinted windows as they drove to the glass tower downtown. Julian Blackwood's office occupied the entire top floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows. Steel and leather furniture. The view made Emma dizzy. He stood when she entered. Tall, dark suit, perfectly tailored, gray eyes that looked like they'd forgotten how to soften. Handsome in that cold, untouchable way. Nothing about him suggested warmth. Ms. Rodriguez, he didn't offer his hand. Smart? She might have refused it. Let's skip the pleasantries, Emma said, her voice steadier than she felt. You know why I'm here? Sit, please. She remained standing. I don't take orders from you. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe. People probably didn't say no to Julian Blackwood often. Fair enough. He moved to the window, putting distance between them. I've spoken with my lawyers. The clinic is liable. We can sue for millions. You'd never have to work again? You think I want your money? Everyone wants money. He said it like a fact, not an insult. I want my life back. The life I had before your genetic material ended up inside my body without my consent. He flinched. Barely visible, but there. That's not how I'd describe it.
Ah!
Then how would you describe it, Mr. Blackwood? Because from where I'm standing, this is assault. Medical rape. The word hung in the air like smoke. Julian's jaw tightened. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter. You're right. That's exactly what it is. He turned to face her fully. And I'm sorry. That's inadequate, I know. But I am sorry this happened to you. Emma hadn't expected that. Hadn't expected him to sound almost human. What do you want from me? She asked. I want to know what you're planning to do about the pregnancy. Yes. The question sat between them, heavy and complicated. Emma's hand moved unconsciously to her stomach. I don't know yet, she admitted. This isn't what I wanted, but it's not the baby's fault. Julian studied her for a long moment. If you decide to continue the pregnancy, I'll provide everything. Medical care, living expenses, education, whatever you need. In exchange for what? Nothing. No strings. I'm not trying to control you, just trying to buy me. Trying to take responsibility, he corrected. There's a difference, is there? Emma's voice was sharp. You live up here in your glass tower, and I live in a studio apartment where the heat doesn't work half the time? You think throwing money at this makes it equal? No, Julian said quietly. Nothing makes this equal, but I can try to make it less impossible. Emma felt tears threatening and hated herself for it. She wouldn't cry in front of him. Wouldn't give him that. I need time, she said, to think, to figure out what I want. Take all the time you need. She turned to leave, then stopped. Why were you there? At the clinic. Banking genetic material at 36 seems young. Julian's expression closed off again, back to stone. Insurance policy. I don't do relationships well. Thought I might want a child someday? On my terms? Well, Emma said, bitter laughter in her throat. Congratulations. You're getting one. Just not how you planned. She left before he could respond. In the elevator, her phone buzzed. A message from Julian's assistant. An encrypted email with access to medical files. The clinic's full report on what happened. Emma opened it with shaking hands. And there, buried in the technical language and legal disclaimers, she found something that made her blood run cold. Zoe Chen, the exhausted lab technician, hadn't been scheduled for a double shift. She'd been forced to cover because 2 other technicians called in sick. Both worked for a staffing agency owned by a subsidiary of a company that had business ties to Julian's corporation. It could be coincidence, or it could be something much worse. Emma stared at her phone as the elevator descended, a new question forming in her mind. What if this wasn't an accident at all? Emma spent 3 days digging through public records and corporate filings. Her friend Carla, who worked in journalism, helped connect the dots. The staffing agency, the subsidiary company, the web of businesses that all traced back somehow to Julian Blackwood's empire. She showed up at his office without warning at 7 in the morning, bypassed his assistant and walked straight through his door. Julian looked up from his laptop, surprise crossing his face. Emma, I didn't expect. Was it planned? Her voice cut like glass. What? The error. The convenient mistake that got me pregnant with your baby. She threw a folder of documents on his desk. That staffing agency owns the company that forced Zoe Chen to work a 20-hour shift. And you own that staffing agency. Julian stood slowly, his face unreadable. You think I orchestrated this? Tell me I'm wrong. You're wrong. Then explain the connections. I own hundreds of companies, Julian said, his voice tight with control. Subsidiaries, investments, acquisitions. I don't personally approve staffing schedules for medical technicians. Convenient, it's the truth. He moved around the desk, closer to her. Emma, I understand why you'd think the worst of me. But I didn't do this. I wouldn't do this. Why should I believe you? Because if I wanted a child, I have enough money to hire a surrogate. Legally, consensually. His gray eyes held hers. I wouldn't need to violate someone. Emma wanted to believe him. That was the dangerous part. Standing this close, seeing the tension in his jaw, the genuine anger in his eyes, she almost did.
Yes.
Someone did this, she said. If not you, then who? I don't know. But I'll find out. We'll find out, Emma corrected. This is my body, my life. I'm not sitting on the sidelines. Julian studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Okay, we investigate together. They spent the next week digging deeper. Late nights in Julian's office, Emma cross-referencing documents while Julian made calls to lawyers and investigators. Slowly, they pieced together a picture. The error wasn't random. Someone had manipulated the scheduling system, ensuring Zoe Chen would be exhausted and overworked. Someone had altered the patient files, making the mix-up almost inevitable. But why? Emma asked one night, rubbing her tired eyes. She was 12 weeks pregnant now. Starting to show, Julian leaned back in his chair, a terrible understanding dawning on his face. Marcus, who? My business partner. Or former partner. Julian's voice was cold. We had a falling out 6 months ago. He wanted to take the company in a different direction. I refused. He tried to stage a hostile takeover. But what does that have to do with me? He's always believed I was too focused on work. Too isolated. Too controlled. Julian's hands clenched into fists. He used to say the only way I'd ever be vulnerable was if I had something I couldn't control. Something human. Emma felt ice in her veins. A child. If I have an heir, it changes the power structure of the company. Makes succession complicated. Makes me vulnerable. Julian looked at her, genuine horror in his eyes. He weaponized you. Used you to create leverage against me? That's insane. That's Marcus. Emma sat down heavily, one hand on her stomach. So, I'm what? Collateral damage in your corporate war? I'm going to destroy him, Julian said quietly. The violence in his voice was barely contained. I'm going to take everything from him. That doesn't fix this. No, Julian agreed. Nothing fixes this. They sat in silence, the weight of the betrayal settling around them. Emma felt violated all over again. Not by accident. By design, I should go home, she said finally. Emma. Wait. Julian stood, moving toward her. Stay, please. It's late. You're exhausted. I have guest rooms. I don't need your charity. It's not charity. He stopped, searching for words. I don't want you alone right now. Not when we know someone targeted you deliberately. Emma wanted to argue, but she was tired, so tired. And the apartment with broken heat suddenly felt very far away. One night, she said Julian showed her to a room that was bigger than her entire apartment. Emma lay in the expensive sheets and stared at the ceiling, one hand on her growing belly. At 2 a.m, she heard footsteps. Julian, standing in her doorway, can't sleep either. He asked, no. He hesitated, then entered. Sat in the chair by the window. They didn't speak for a long time. I never wanted children, Julian finally said. I thought I was too broken for it. Too cold. And now? Now there's going to be a person in the world who shares my DNA. And I'm terrified. Welcome to the club, Emma said softly. Are you keeping it? The baby. Yes, the word came out certain. Not for you. Not because of the money, but because this child didn't ask for any of this, and someone has to protect them. We'll both protect them, Julian said. Whatever happens between us, we'll protect them. It was a promise. Maybe the first real one he'd ever made. Emma fell asleep with Julian still in the chair, watching over her like a guard dog, protecting something precious. She woke at dawn to find him gone, and a note on the bedside table, Marcus knows where you live. Pack your things. You're moving in here until this is over? Non-negotiable. And underneath, in smaller handwriting, I'm sorry. Living with Julian Blackwood was like learning a new language. The penthouse had rooms Emma hadn't explored. Staff who appeared and disappeared like ghosts, silence that felt heavier than sound. Julian worked 18-hour days, came home smelling like expensive cologne and exhaustion, and sometimes forgot to eat until Emma put food in front of him. You're terrible at taking care of yourself, she said one night, watching him stare at a laptop at midnight. I'm aware. He didn't look up. You should be sleeping. The baby needs rest. The baby's fine. You're the one who looks half dead. He finally met her eyes. Dark circles shadowed his face, making him look older than 36. Marcus is moving fast. He's trying to buy out board members, spread rumors about my competence. If I show any weakness now, I lose everything. Let me help. You're already doing enough. Carrying my child while my enemies circle, Akema moved closer, placed a hand on his shoulder. The touch seemed to startle him. You can't do everything alone. Something in his expression cracked just slightly. I don't know how to do it any other way. That night marked a shift. They started eating dinner together. Emma learned that Julian played piano when stressed, that he'd lost his parents young, that success had been both salvation and prison. Julian learned that Emma dreamed of opening her own design firm, that she'd grown up poor but fierce, that she was terrified of becoming her mother who'd raised 3 kids alone. You won't, Julian said with certainty. You're stronger than you know. At 16 weeks pregnant, Emma woke to find Julian asleep at his desk, still in his suit from yesterday. She covered him with a blanket. His hand caught hers. Stay, he murmured. Half-dash asleep, she stayed. The baby kicked for the first time while they were reviewing legal documents. Emma gasped, hand flying to her stomach. What's wrong? Julian was on his feet instantly. The baby jest. She grabbed his hand, placed it on her belly. Wait for it. They stood frozen. Then, a flutter. Small but definite. Julian's face transformed. Wonder replaced the cold calculation. That's our baby, Emma finished softly. The word hung between them. Our. Julian's thumb traced gentle circles on her stomach. I never thought I'd feel this. Feel what? Connected to something. Someone. He looked at her. Really looked at her. To you. Emma's breath caught. The air between them felt electric, dangerous. Julian's hand moved from her stomach to her face, cupping her cheek with unexpected tenderness. Emma, he whispered. The penthouse alarm shattered the moment. Julian's phone erupted with notifications. Marcus had made his move. A press conference scheduled for morning. Evidence of corporate malfeasance. Allegations that Julian had used company resources for personal matters. Photos of Emma entering and leaving the penthouse, carefully framed to look sordid. He's going to destroy your reputation, Emma said, reading the leaked documents. Paint you as reckless, unstable. Let him. Julian's voice was steel. I have evidence of what he did. The manipulation. The medical assault. I'll burn his entire world down, and me. What happens to me when you release that evidence? Julian went still. What do you mean? The medical records become public. My name, my face. The story of how I was forcibly impregnated by a billionaire's stored genetic material. Emma felt sick. I become the story. Forever. We'll protect your identity. Seal the records. You can't seal everything. This is too big. Too scandalous. Emma sat down heavily. Your truth is my humiliation. Your justice is my exposure. Julian crouched in front of her, taking both her hands. Tell me what to do, please. Tell me how to fix this. Emma looked at the man who'd become something she'd never expected. Not just the father of her child, but someone who felt like home in the chaos. Let him win, she said quietly. What? Take the fall. Let Marcus damage your reputation. Keep the medical records sealed. Emma's voice was steady, despite the tears. Protect me and the baby, even if it costs you everything. No. Julian's grip tightened. I won't let him get away with what he did to you. He already got away with it. The moment it happened, Emma touched Julian's face. But you can still save something. You can save us. There has to be another way. There isn't. Not one that keeps us safe. Emma stood. Decision made. I'm asking you to make a sacrifice. For people you barely know. For a child you never planned. For a woman who walked into your life by accident. Julian stood too, his composure fracturing. You're not an accident. Not anymore. Then prove it, Emma whispered. Choose us over revenge. The silence stretched. Emma watched Julian war with himself. Everything he'd built, everything he'd fought for, against a woman and an unborn child he'd known for barely 3 months. At dawn, Julian made the call to his lawyers. No counterattack. No release of evidence. A public statement taking responsibility for personal matters that had distracted from his corporate duties. Resignation from his CEO position. A quiet settlement with Marcus that gave away half his company. Emma listened from the doorway as Julian dismantled his empire with phone calls that lasted less than 10 minutes each. When he finished, he looked empty. Hollowed out. "It's done," he said flatly. Emma crossed to him, wrapped her arms around his rigid body. "Thank you. I gave up everything." "No." Emma pulled back to meet his eyes. "You gave up everything else. But you kept us." Something broke in Julian then. He pulled her close, buried his face in her hair, and for the first time since she'd met him, allowed himself to feel the weight of what he'd lost and what he'd chosen instead. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted. "How to be someone who chooses people over power." "We'll figure it out," Emma said. "Together." That night, Julian played piano for hours while Emma rested on the couch, her hand on her growing belly. The music was sad and beautiful and full of grief for the life he'd fled, surrendered. But when he finally stopped playing and turned to look at her, Emma saw something new in his eyes. Not regret, something that looked almost like peace, until the doorbell rang at midnight. And Emma opened it to find police officers with a warrant for Julian's arrest. Julian Blackwood. "You're under arrest for corporate fraud and conspiracy." Emma watched them handcuff him, her blood turning to ice. Julian's face was stone, but his eyes found hers across the room. "Call Davidson," he said calmly. "My lawyer. Don't say anything to anyone." They took him away before she could respond. Emma stood in the empty penthouse, hand on her belly, and felt the careful peace they'd built shatter into pieces. Marcus hadn't been satisfied with taking Julian's company. He wanted complete destruction. The next morning, Emma sat across from Julian's lawyer in a sterile conference room. "The charges are fabricated," Davidson said, sliding documents across the table. "But Marcus has paid people to lie, created false paper trails. Unless we can prove he manipulated the medical records, Julian could face years in prison." "So we release the evidence," Emma said, "which exposes you completely. Your name, your medical records, every detail of what happened." Davidson's expression was kind but firm. "You'd become the most famous victim in the country, hunted by media, dissected by strangers. Is that what you want for you and your child?" Emma closed her eyes. Julian had sacrificed his company to protect her. Now she had to choose between protecting herself or saving him. Not a choice at all. "Release everything," she said. "Emma," I said, "release it. All of it." She stood, hand on her stomach. "This baby deserves a father who's not in prison. Whatever it costs me." The press conference happened the next day. Emma stood beside Davidson, 6 months pregnant and terrified, as he detailed exactly what Marcus had done. The manipulation, the forced pregnancy, the corporate warfare that had used her body as a weapon. The cameras flashed like gunfire. Emma kept her chin up and her hand on her belly. Protecting the child who couldn't protect themselves, Julian was released that afternoon. Emma found him in the penthouse, standing at the window, staring at the city below. He didn't turn when she entered. "You shouldn't have done that," he said quietly. "I know. Now everyone knows your face. Your story? Your trauma? I know. Why?" He finally turned, and his face was raw with emotion. "Why would you sacrifice yourself for me?" Emma moved to him, taking his hands in hers. "Because you sacrificed yourself for us first. Because I'm tired of being a victim. Because that baby in there," she placed his hand on her belly, "deserves parents who fight for each other." "Parents," Julian repeated, the word strange in his mouth. "Ash." "Yes, if you want to be. If you're willing to do this the hard way. No money to hide behind now. No power to smooth things over. Just two people trying to figure out how to build something real." Julian's thumb traced circles on her stomach, where their daughter kicked and turned. "I don't know how to do real, neither do one." Emma smiled through tears. "But we can learn together." He kissed her then, gentle and desperate all at once. A promise and a question and an answer. The media frenzy lasted weeks. Emma and Julian became the story of the year. Some called them victims. Some called them opportunists. Emma stopped reading the headlines. Marcus was arrested 3 weeks before Emma's due date. The evidence, once released, unraveled his entire operation. Corporate fraud. Medical conspiracy. Dozens of charges that would keep him imprisoned for decades. "It's over," Julian said, watching the news coverage with Emma on the couch.
No.
Emma corrected, hand on her massive belly. "It's just beginning." Their daughter was born on a cold December morning. 7 pounds, 3 ounces. Dark hair and gray eyes like her father. Lungs that could shatter glass. Emma held her while Julian stood frozen at the bedside, staring at the tiny human they'd created through trauma and choice, and something that felt dangerously close to love. "Do you want to hold her?" Emma asked softly. Julian's hand shook as he took the baby. She was so small against his chest, so impossibly fragile. He looked at Emma with tears streaming down his face.
Thank you.
He whispered. "For giving me this, for giving me everything." "We gave each other everything," Emma said. They named her Sophia, hope in Spanish, a hope neither of them had felt in years. Julian sold the penthouse, and they bought a small house in a quiet neighborhood. He took a job as a consultant. Normal hours, normal life. Emma opened her design firm from the spare bedroom. They were happy in a way neither had imagined possible. Some nights, Julian would wake from nightmares of losing them. Emma would hold him until the shaking stopped, reminding him that they were here. They were real. They weren't going anywhere. "Do you ever regret it?" Julian asked one night, Sophia sleeping between them in the bed. "Keeping the pregnancy, choosing this life?" Emma looked at their daughter, at the man who'd become her partner in every sense, at the strange and beautiful life they'd built from catastrophe. "Not for a second," she said. Julian kissed Sophia's forehead, then Emma's lips. "Best mistake I ever made." "We're not a mistake," Emma corrected gently. "We're a choice. Every single day, we're a choice." "Then I choose you," Julian said. "Every day. For the rest of my life." Emma settled against his shoulder, watching Sophia sleep, feeling the impossible weight and lightness of this life they'd created. They'd been brought together by violation and betrayal, but they'd built something true from the wreckage. Not perfect, it's not easy, but theirs, and that was enough. Sophia stirred, her tiny hand reaching for her father's finger. Julian held it gently, this small person who had changed everything, who had broken them both open and shown them what it meant to be human. The sun rose over their small house, casting gold across 3 people who had found each other in the darkness and chosen, against all odds, to become a family. Not because they had to, because they wanted to. The end.